Riker Westfield had always been meticulous in his planning. As one of Portland's most respected structural engineers, he built his reputation on anticipating problems before they materialized. At 42, he'd constructed an equally methodical life. A sprawling home in the West Hills, 2 teenage children with promising futures, and a marriage of 17 years to Vanessa, who'd once been his college sweetheart. The rain pounded against the windows of his downtown office as Riker reviewed the final blueprints for the Horizon Tower, a 60-story skyscraper that would redefine the city's skyline. His company had beaten out his brother Donovan's firm for the contract, a victory that had widened the rift between them into something resembling a canyon. "Mr. Westfield, your 3 o'clock canceled," his assistant Laurel announced from the doorway. And Mrs. Westfield called. "She said not to forget about Thanksgiving dinner at your parents' tomorrow." Riker nodded without looking up. "Thanks, Laurel. Did she mention if Hudson and Bailey confirmed they're coming home from college?" "She didn't say, but there was another call earlier from your son. He asked if you could pick him up from the airport tonight, instead of tomorrow morning. Something about wanting to surprise his mother." A smile crossed Riker's face, the first genuine one in weeks. Hudson, his 20-year-old son studying architecture at MIT, had always been thoughtful that way. Bailey, his 18-year-old daughter at UCLA, took more after Vanessa with her spontaneous nature and artistic temperament. "Tell Diego I'm leaving early. I'll finish these revisions at home." On the drive to his house, Riker's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "She's not who you think she is. Check the guest house security footage from last weekend. I'm sorry." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. The guest house had been Vanessa's art studio for the past year, a place where she claimed to need solitude for her sculptures. Riker had respected her space, despite the gradual distance that had grown between them. Now, a cold dread pooled in his stomach. At home, Vanessa wasn't there, a Thursday pottery class, according to the family calendar. Riker went straight to his home office and accessed the security system. The guest house cameras had been disabled, but the exterior property cameras revealed enough. Donovan's silver Audi pulling into their private drive at 2:17 p.m. last Saturday, leaving 4 hours later. Not the first time, based on the timestamp archives going back months. His brother. His wife. The betrayal crystallized like ice in his veins. Riker's phone rang. His father, Lawrence Westfield, the patriarch who'd built Westfield Construction from nothing, spoke with measured gravity. "Son, your mother and I need to speak with you before tomorrow's dinner. There are some family matters to discuss." "Can it wait, Dad? I'm in the middle of something important." "I'm afraid not. It concerns the future of the company and some decisions we've recently made." His father's voice carried an unusual tension. "I'll be there in an hour," Riker replied, his mind already calculating, connecting dots. Before leaving, he made 2 calls. The first was to his private investigator, Mira Cowell, who'd helped his company vet potential clients for years. "I need everything you can find on Donovan and Vanessa's activities over the past year. Phone records, hotel stays, financial transactions, everything." The second call was to his attorney, Barrett Sloan. "Barrett, I need you to prepare divorce papers, but don't file yet. And I need a complete audit of my personal assets, separate from anything connected to Westfield Construction. Immediately." "Trouble at home, Riker?" Barrett's voice was careful, professional. "No," Riker answered coldly. "Just preparation. I never start a project without the proper groundwork." As he drove toward his parents' estate in Lake Oswego, Riker's mind was not on the rain-slicked roads, but on the foundation of lies beneath his life, and how methodically he would dismantle it. Lawrence and Martha Westfield's lakeside mansion had always represented the pinnacle of success to Riker. Growing up, he'd watched his father transform a small local construction business into Westfield Construction, one of the Northwest's premier development companies. Now, as Riker parked beside his mother's Range Rover, the house seemed more fortress than home. Martha greeted him with a kiss that barely touched his cheek, Your father's in his study. He's been on edge all day. Riker found Lawrence standing at the window, tumbler of scotch in hand, gazing out at the boat dock where Riker and Donovan had spent summers as boys. You wanted to talk, Riker said, declining the offered drink. Lawrence sighed heavily. I've made a decision about succession at Westfield Construction. I assumed we'd continue as planned. I run operations and engineering. Donovan handles sales and client relationships. That was the plan, Lawrence agreed, swirling his scotch. But Donovan has brought some concerns to my attention. The Horizon Tower project is proceeding exactly on schedule and under budget. Riker interrupted. What concerns? He's shown me some calculations suggesting your foundation design has flaws that could become catastrophic over time. He's brought in consultants who agree. Riker stared at his father. That's impossible. My team triple-checked those calculations. He's also pointed out that your marriage to Vanessa has been strained. Says you've been distracted, making errors. The board is concerned about stability and leadership. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't just about an affair. It was a coordinated attack on everything Riker had built. So what's the decision? Riker asked, his voice dangerously calm. We're naming Donovan as sole CEO effective after the new year. You'll retain your shares, but step down from operations. Lawrence wouldn't meet his eyes. It's what's best for the company. And you believe Donovan's claims without consulting me. I've seen the reports myself, son, and I've noticed the changes in you. You've become harder, more isolated. Riker stood, straightening his jacket. I see. And does this family decision include my children's inheritance as well? Lawrence looked uncomfortable. We've restructured the family trust. Given the circumstances, the majority will pass to Donovan and his future heirs. I understand perfectly, Riker said, each word precise as a surgical cut. We'll discuss this further at dinner tomorrow. As he left, Riker noticed a text from Mira. Preliminary findings ready. More concerning than expected. Call ASAP. In his car, Riker listened as Mira detailed what she'd found. They've been meeting for at least 14 months. But it goes deeper. I found evidence of shared accounts opened 6 months ago, large transfers from your family trust authorized by your parents. And there's something else. Records of meetings between Donovan and your project engineers for Horizon Tower. He's sabotaging my design, Riker said, the final piece falling into place, and convincing my own team to help him. There's more, Mira continued. Your daughter Bailey has been in regular contact with Donovan, meeting him when she's home from college, and your son's flight, it was changed. He's actually arriving tomorrow morning, not tonight. The betrayal expanded like a blast radius. Even his children were being drawn into the web. Keep digging, Riker instructed. I want to know everyone involved. At home, Riker bypassed the main house and went to the guest house studio. Using his rarely exercised owner's key, he entered the space that had once been just a guest bedroom and sitting area. Now it was transformed. Easels, clay sculptures, and art supplies scattered about. But art wasn't what caught his eye. On the desk sat architectural renderings, drafts of the Horizon Tower with subtle but critical modifications to his original design. Modifications that would introduce the very flaws Donovan had discovered. Beside them lay a legal document with Vanessa's signature, transferring her portion of their joint assets to a new account. Riker took photographs of everything, careful not to disturb the evidence. Then he sat in the gathering darkness, formulating the architecture of his response. When Vanessa returned home, he greeted her with a practiced smile, discussing Thanksgiving plans as if nothing had changed. Hudson texted that he can't wait to see us, he mentioned casually. Did he? Vanessa replied, not meeting his eyes. That's wonderful. Another lie. Another confirmation. That night, as Vanessa slept, Riker made one final call to an old college friend who'd gone into digital security after a checkered past. Nash, I need a system that will capture and archive communications from specific devices without detection, and I need it operational by tomorrow morning. That's cutting it close, ROAK, and probably not entirely legal. I'll make it worth the risk. This is personal. Say no more. I'll be there at 6. As midnight approached, Riker stood at his home office window, watching the city lights below. The family he trusted had constructed an elaborate betrayal. Tomorrow, at Thanksgiving dinner, they would spring their trap. But they'd forgotten the most important rule of engineering: always account for countermeasures. Thanksgiving Day dawned with appropriate gloom. Heavy clouds threatened the kind of deluge Portland was famous for. By noon, Nash had installed untraceable monitoring software on Vanessa's devices and placed discreet recording equipment throughout the house. Riker had also transferred substantial funds to accounts only he could access, a preemptive move against the financial strangulation he anticipated. "You're sure this is necessary?" Nash had asked, concern evident beneath his professional demeanor. "More than necessary," Riker had replied. "It's self-preservation." At 3 o'clock, the Westfield family gathered at Lawrence and Martha's estate. Donovan arrived early, helping Martha in the kitchen while casting victorious glances at Riker. Hudson and Bailey hugged their father with what seemed like genuine affection, though Riker noted Bailey's eyes darting to her phone throughout their conversation. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked his daughter. "Just college stuff, Dad," she replied quickly. Too quickly. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Martha's traditional spread, Lawrence's ritual carving of the turkey, wine flowing freely. Riker observed it all with detached precision, noting how Vanessa positioned herself between Donovan and Bailey, how his parents exchanged meaningful glances as dessert approached. Lawrence finally cleared his throat, tapping his glass for attention. "Before we have pumpkin pie, there's a family matter we need to address." He looked to Martha, who nodded encouragingly. "Riker, I know we discussed some changes yesterday, but after further consideration, your mother and I believe more decisive action is necessary." Riker sipped his water, face impassive. "We're cutting you from the will," Lawrence declared, his voice hardening. "Your brother deserves everything after what you've done." "What I've done?" Riker raised an eyebrow. "The Horizon Tower project is compromised because of your negligence," Donovan interjected. "You've put people's lives at risk, not to mention the company's reputation." "And that's not all," Martha added. "Your behavior has been concerning for months. The drinking, the late nights." "What drinking?" Riker asked mildly. "I haven't had alcohol in years." "Don't lie to us," Vanessa snapped, her hand sliding beneath the table. "We've all seen the changes. You're never home, always locked in your office." Riker noticed his wife's fingers intertwining with Donovan's under the tablecloth, a gesture meant to be hidden, but visible from his angle. "Hudson, Bailey," Riker addressed his children calmly. "Did you know about this family meeting?" His son looked confused, but Bailey couldn't meet his eyes. "Bailey's been worried about you too, Dad," Vanessa said. "We all have. That's why we've made arrangements." Lawrence continued, "Donovan will take full control of Westfield construction immediately, not after the new year. The family trust will be restructured accordingly." "And there's something else," Vanessa added, squeezing Donovan's hand openly now. "I want a divorce, and the kids hate you anyway." Hudson's head snapped up. "What? Mom, I never said." "It's okay, Hudson," Vanessa interrupted. "You don't have to pretend anymore. Your father knows what he's done to this family." Riker set down his napkin and stood slowly. "I see. And what exactly have I done?" "You've neglected your family for your work," Martha said. "You've made critical errors that could have cost lives," added Lawrence. "You've become cold, distant," Vanessa concluded. "The kids, and I deserve better." "The kids," Riker repeated thoughtfully. "Hudson, would you share what you told me last week about your architectural internship?" Hudson looked confused, About working with Grandpa's company next summer. No, Riker corrected gently. About the engineering assessment you were asked to do on my Horizon Tower designs. Silence fell across the table. I never did any assessment, Hudson said slowly. I'm not qualified to evaluate structural engineering at that level. Riker nodded. And yet, someone created a report with your electronic signature, dated 3 weeks ago, claiming my designs were fundamentally flawed. What? Hudson looked stunned. Bailey. Riker turned to his daughter. Would you tell everyone about the scholarship offer you received last month? The one contingent on your trust fund access. Bailey paled. Dad. A scholarship that doesn't exist, Riker continued. From a foundation created 6 weeks ago by your uncle. Donovan stood abruptly. That's enough. Riker, you're obviously unstable. Sit down, Riker commanded with such quiet authority that Donovan complied instinctively. I'm not finished. From his jacket, Riker produced a tablet. Let me share what I've discovered in the past 24 hours. He played a series of recordings, conversations between Donovan and Vanessa planning, not just their affair, but the systematic dismantling of Riker's life. Meetings where they convinced Lawrence and Martha that Riker was becoming unstable. Discussions with Bailey about accessing her trust fund early in exchange for supporting their narrative. You've been spying on us, Vanessa hissed. I've been gathering evidence, Riker corrected, including this. The next recording showed Donovan instructing one of Riker's engineers to modify the Horizon Tower plans, introducing the very flaws they'd later discover. You altered my designs, Riker addressed his brother. You tampered with critical safety calculations to frame me for negligence. Lawrence's face had gone ashen. Donovan, tell me this isn't true. It's all manipulated, Donovan insisted. Riker's desperate. I've submitted the original files with authentication timestamps to the board and the city inspector. Riker interrupted, his tone resolute, along with evidence of who changed them and when. Martha's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. Why would you do this, Donovan? Because he's always been jealous, Riker answered for him. I earned my position while he relied on charm and manipulation. The Horizon Tower was the final straw when his firm lost the bid to mine. Vanessa stood, her composure cracking. You've twisted everything. We're done, Riker. The kids are coming with me. No, Mom, Hudson said firmly. I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening. Me neither, Bailey added quietly, tears streaming down her face. Did you really try to buy me off with a fake scholarship, Uncle Donovan? They're manipulating you, Vanessa insisted. Riker, we want you out of the house tonight. You have until midnight. Riker checked his watch with deliberate calm. That won't be necessary. I've already made arrangements. Of course you have, Donovan sneered, running away when confronted, typical. Not running, Riker corrected. Responding. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Hudson, Bailey, regardless of what you decide, your college funds are secure in trusts only I can access. They can't be touched by anyone else, including your mother or grandparents. You can't just take their money, Vanessa exclaimed. It's not their money, Riker replied coolly. It's my children's future, which I established with earnings from my private consulting work, separate from Westfield Construction. He turned to his parents. As for the company and family trust, I've instructed my attorneys to initiate proceedings first thing tomorrow morning. The evidence of Donovan's tampering with the Horizon Tower plans constitutes criminal fraud. You wouldn't, Lawrence breathed. I already have, Riker confirmed. The authorities have been notified. We're your family, Martha protested. You ceased being my family the moment you conspired against me, Riker replied without emotion. Hudson, Bailey, I'll be at the Sentinel Hotel if you want to talk. The decision is yours. As Riker walked out, the weight of decades of family history fell away. In his car, he watched the rain cascade down the windshield, obscuring the house where he'd once believed in unbreakable bonds. His phone buzzed. Barrett confirming that all preparations were complete. Everything was in motion now. As Riker drove away from his parents' estate, the first notifications began to light up his family's phones. Automated messages triggered by his departure, setting in motion the architecture of consequences he'd designed overnight. By the time he reached the highway, his father had called 13 times in panic. Riker let each call go to voicemail. Lawrence Westfield was discovering that his elder son had just executed a silent takeover of Westfield Construction through proxy votes and leveraged stock options. The culmination of a contingency plan Riker had established years ago, but never expected to use. The midnight deadline they'd given him would come and go. By morning, none of them would recognize the landscape of their lives. In the penthouse suite of the Sentinel, Riker poured himself a rare glass of scotch and allowed himself one moment of genuine grief for the family he'd lost. Then, methodical as always, he opened his laptop and began the next phase of his plan. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Riker sat in Barrett Sloane's office, reviewing the cascade of consequences his actions had triggered. The law firm's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Portland's rainy skyline, including the partially constructed Horizon Tower in the distance. The board voted unanimously to remove Donovan and reinstate you as CEO, Barrett reported, sliding documents across the polished table. Your father's voting rights have been temporarily suspended pending the fraud investigation. And the project. City inspectors confirmed your original designs were sound. Construction resumes tomorrow under your direct supervision. Riker nodded, his face revealing nothing of the satisfaction he felt. The divorce proceedings. Vanessa is contesting everything, as expected. She's hired Tessa Monroe. The shark, Riker commented. Tessa Monroe was notorious for securing brutal settlements for her clients. Let her circle. We're prepared. Barrett hesitated. There's something else. Your daughter Bailey requested a meeting, alone, without her mother's knowledge. This was unexpected. Since Thanksgiving, Hudson had reached out several times, but Bailey had maintained radio silence, apparently siding with Vanessa and Donovan. When? She's here now, actually. In the conference room. Bailey looked smaller somehow, hunched in the oversized leather chair, her UCLA sweatshirt making her seem younger than her 18 years. When Riker entered, she didn't stand. Mom thinks I'm touring apartment options for next semester, she said without preamble. Are you? No. Bailey pushed a flash drive across the table. I'm bringing you this. What is it? Everything. Their plans, their conversations. I've been recording them since September. Riker's carefully maintained composure slipped. You knew? All this time. Bailey's eyes, so like his own, hardened. Uncle Donovan approached me last summer with this scholarship story. Something felt off. So I started paying attention. Then I found Mom's second phone with all the messages between them. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because I needed to be sure what they were planning. She hesitated. And I wasn't sure whose side I should be on. You've always been so focused on work, Dad. Sometimes it felt like your buildings mattered more than we did. The truth of her words pierced him more deeply than any betrayal. Bailey. Let me finish, she interrupted. I was angry enough to listen when they started talking about you being unstable. But then Uncle Donovan asked me to lie about things you'd supposedly said to me. Dark things, scary things. That's when I knew something was really wrong. She tapped the flash drive. There's more than just their affair on here. They were planning to have you committed, Dad. Involuntarily. They had doctors lined up to diagnose you with paranoid delusions. Riker felt cold fury crystallizing in his chest. That's why they wanted me out by midnight. They had a facility ready. Bailey nodded. A private psychiatric hospital in eastern Washington. Mom signed papers as your next of kin. They were going to claim you'd threatened suicide. For a moment, Riker couldn't speak, the magnitude of the betrayal expanding beyond what even he had imagined. There's something else you should know, Bailey continued. Hudson never knew any of this. They kept him completely in the dark because they thought he wouldn't go along with it. He really believed you were working too hard and needed help. And now he's devastated. Uncle Donovan tried to convince him you'd fake the evidence, but Hudson's smart enough to see through that. He's been staying at a friend's place, refuses to talk to Mom or the grandparents. Riker studied his daughter, seeing for the first time not just his physical features reflected in her face, but his strategic mind as well. "Why are you telling me all this now?" Bailey's composure cracked slightly. "Because they're not stopping, Dad. They're desperate. And I'm afraid of what they might do next. Do you want to stay with me at the hotel?" She shook her head. "No, I need to stay close to keep gathering information. Just be careful." After Bailey left, Riker reviewed the contents of the flash drive with Barrett. What they found went beyond family betrayal into criminal conspiracy. Evidence of Donovan bribing city officials, Vanessa transferring funds from Riker's accounts, detailed plans for having Riker declared mentally incompetent. "This changes the game," Barrett said grimly. "We need to involve law enforcement." "Not yet," Riker replied, an entirely new architecture taking shape in his mind. "They've shown me what they're capable of. Now I'll show them the same courtesy." That evening, in his hotel suite, Riker received an unexpected visitor. Hudson stood in the hallway, soaked from the rain, his face haggard from sleepless nights. "Can I come in?" he asked simply. Riker stepped aside, watching as his son paced the living area of the suite, struggling to find words. "I didn't know," Hudson finally said, "about any of it. I swear." "I believe you. Bailey showed me some of what she found. It's—" Hudson shook his head, unable to continue. "Sit down," Riker said, pouring his son a glass of water. "You look exhausted. I've been trying to understand how this happened. Why Mom would—" Hudson's voice broke. "She told me yesterday that you've been abusive for years, that you've threatened her and Bailey. That's why she turned to Uncle Donovan." "And do you believe that?" Hudson met his father's gaze directly. "No, I've never seen you raise your voice, let alone your hand. But she was so convincing." "They're desperate," Riker said, echoing Bailey's assessment. "They've lost their initial advantage. So now they're trying to control the narrative. What are you going to do?" Riker considered his son gifted, honest, perhaps too trusting, just as Riker himself had once been. "I'm going to dismantle everything they've built piece by piece," he said simply. "The question is, where do you stand? With you, always with you." Riker nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride and regret. His children had been drawn into a war they didn't create. "Then I'll need your help. But I want you to understand something first." Riker leaned forward, making sure Hudson was listening carefully. "What I'm planning goes beyond legal remedies. There won't be forgiveness at the end of this road. After what they tried to do to you, I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," Riker said, opening his laptop, "because we're going to make sure they never recover." As father and son began working, rain lashed against the windows, a fitting backdrop to the storm they were about to unleash. Over the next week, Riker operated from the Sentinel Hotel, transforming his suite into a command center, while maintaining a public face as the reinstated CEO of Westfield Construction. He worked meticulously on a separate private project, the systematic dismantling of everyone who had betrayed him. Barrett Sloan had taken one look at Riker's proposed strategy and recused himself. "As your attorney, I can't be involved in this. As your friend, I'll say only this. Be careful you don't become what they falsely accused you of being." Riker had simply nodded. "I understand." Consider our professional relationship paused. Instead, he assembled a different team. Nash handling digital surveillance and cyber operations, Mira Cowell expanding her investigative work, Hudson providing insights into family vulnerabilities, and Bailey continuing to feed information from inside enemy lines. "We've confirmed your parents have liquidated significant assets," Mira reported during a secure video call. "They're moving money offshore, preparing for potential fallout from the fraud investigation. "Can we track the funds?" Riker asked. "Already done," Nash interjected. "They're using a private banker in Geneva, Preston Halliday. He's managed Lawrence's hidden accounts for years." "Hidden accounts?" Hudson looked confused. Grandpa always said transparency was the foundation of business ethics. "Another lie," Riker said flatly. "Your grandfather has maintained shadow accounts since before you were born. Tax avoidance strategies that cross the line into evasion. I've identified transfer patterns dating back 15 years, Nash continued, including payments to shell companies owned by your brother in the Caymans." "Donovan was skimming from the company?" Hudson asked, disbelieving. "While accusing me of financial mismanagement," Riker confirmed. "Perfect misdirection." Bailey joined the video call late, speaking in hushed tones from her bedroom at their family home. "Mom met with Uncle Donovan today. They're planning to sell the Portland house and move to St. Louis together. They're talking about having Hudson declared incompetent too, since he's clearly under your influence." "They can't do that," Hudson protested. "They're claiming Dad's manipulating you, possibly with drugs," Bailey explained. "They've already spoken to a doctor who specializes in deprogramming cult victims." Riker's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a coldness that made even Hudson uncomfortable. "Nash, implement Protocol Leviticus." Nash hesitated. "That's the nuclear option, Riker. Once it's done. I understand the consequences. Do it." After the call ended, Hudson turned to his father. "What's Protocol Leviticus?" "Financial cauterization," Riker explained. "By morning, every account connected to your grandparents, mother, and uncle will be frozen by federal authorities pending investigation for money laundering and tax evasion. You're reporting them to the feds. Anonymous evidence has already been submitted. Nash will simply ensure it receives immediate attention." Riker's voice remained clinically detached. "They plan to institutionalize me, Hudson. They were going to take away my freedom, my reputation, my future." Hudson nodded slowly. "And Protocol Leviticus is just the beginning, isn't it?" "Phase 1, Riker confirmed. "Tomorrow, we move to Phase 2. The next morning, Lawrence and Martha Westfield awoke to federal agents at their door with a search warrant. Simultaneously, Vanessa discovered her credit cards declined while attempting to pay for breakfast with a prominent divorce attorney. Across town, Donovan was escorted from his office by FBI agents as his employees watched in stunned silence. Riker observed it all from a distance, receiving real-time updates from his network. He took no pleasure in their panic. This wasn't about enjoyment, but calculated consequence. By evening, the family that had planned to destroy him was in disarray. Lawrence suffered a minor heart attack during questioning and was hospitalized. Martha, always the family's public face, found herself unable to access their charitable foundation's funds for bail. Donovan was released, but placed under travel restrictions. Vanessa, suddenly without financial resources, was forced to move in with her sister in Beaverton. "Isn't this enough?" Hudson asked as they watched the news coverage. "They've lost everything." "Not everything," Riker corrected. "Not yet." Phase 2 began the following day. Using evidence from Bailey's flash drive, Nash meticulously released damaging information to specific journalists. Evidence of Donovan's attempts to bribe city officials, recorded conversations of Vanessa discussing plans to have Riker committed, documentation of the falsified engineering reports. The story exploded across local media before reaching national business publications. Headlines blared: *Westfield Family Civil War. Attempted corporate sabotage and involuntary commitment plot. Exposed*. From his hotel suite, Riker watched the demolition of reputations built over decades. Lawrence Westfield, once Portland's respected business patriarch, now portrayed as a tax-evading conspirator. Donovan, the charismatic heir apparent, revealed as a fraud who'd endangered public safety for personal gain. Vanessa, formerly a fixture in local art circles, exposed as the architect of a plot to commit her husband against his will. "You've destroyed them publicly," Hudson observed, his voice conflicted. "Their reputations are ruined, just as they planned to ruin mine," Riker replied without inflection. "But we're not finished. What's left to take?" "Their future." Riker turned from the window. "That's Phase 3. Bailey arrived that night, having finally abandoned the pretense of neutrality. "Mom knows I've been helping you. She called me a traitor to the family." "You chose truth over loyalty to liars," Riker corrected her. "There's honor in that choice." Together, father and children refined the final phase of Riker's plan, what he called structural reinforcement. While the legal and financial consequences continued to unfold, Riker systematically secured his position and eliminated any possibility of recovery for his betrayers. Using his restored authority at Westfield Construction, he initiated a complete restructuring that eliminated all positions held by Lawrence's longtime allies. He negotiated exclusive contracts with the company's major clients, inserting clauses that specifically excluded Donovan from any future involvement. Through carefully managed press relationships, he positioned Hudson as the company's future leader, effectively writing both Lawrence and Donovan out of the corporate legacy they'd prized above all else. For Vanessa, Riker's approach was equally methodical. The divorce proceedings moved forward with overwhelming evidence of her conspiracy and financial mismanagement. Her attorney withdrew from the case as the potential for criminal charges mounted. Most devastatingly, Riker arranged for Vanessa's art studio space to be purchased by a developer and scheduled for immediate demolition, erasing years of her work in a single day. "Isn't that excessive?" Hudson questioned when he learned of the demolition plan. "Her studio contained falsified evidence against me and plans for my involuntary commitment," Riker responded. "I consider it a biohazard to be eliminated." By the end of the second week, the Westfield family that had gathered for Thanksgiving was fractured beyond repair. Lawrence remained hospitalized, now facing federal charges. Martha had fled to their vacation home in Hawaii, only to find the property already sold through legal mechanisms Riker had quietly put in place years earlier. Donovan, under investigation for fraud and attempted bribery, was reduced to staying in a budget hotel as his assets remained frozen. Vanessa, served with divorce papers that would leave her with nothing, faced potential criminal accessories charges. In his hotel suite, Riker reviewed the status of each aspect of his plan with the precision of an engineer inspecting a completed structure. "Is it enough now, Dad?" Bailey asked quietly. Riker considered the question carefully. "Not quite. There's one final structural element to secure." "What's that?" "The future," Riker replied. "Specifically, yours and Hudson's." On a rare, clear December morning, Riker stood with Hudson and Bailey at the construction site of the Horizon Tower. Workers had resumed their tasks with renewed vigor under Riker's direct supervision. The previous cloud of suspicion lifted. "In engineering, we design not just for immediate stability, but for resilience against future threats," Riker explained, pointing to the massive concrete foundation. "That's what I've been doing for you both, securing a foundation that can't be undermined." Earlier that week, Riker had established new trusts for Hudson and Bailey that circumvented the family trust entirely. He transferred controlling interest in Westfield Construction into these structures, effectively ensuring that regardless of the legal outcomes for Lawrence and Donovan, the company would remain under their rightful control. "You're giving us the company?" Hudson asked, surprised despite everything they'd been through. "I'm securing your inheritance against those who try to steal it," Riker corrected. "The transition will be gradual. You'll learn every aspect of the business, starting from the ground up." "And what about you?" Bailey questioned. "What happens to you when this is all over?" Riker's gaze swept across the Portland skyline, a landscape he'd helped shape over decades. "I'll build something new, something entirely my own." That afternoon, they received word that Lawrence had suffered a second, more serious heart attack. As they drove to the hospital, Riker maintained his disciplined composure, though both Hudson and Bailey watched him carefully for any sign of softening. Martha sat alone in the waiting room, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, aging years in weeks. "He's asking for you," she told Riker, not meeting his eyes. "The doctors say it's serious." Riker entered the hospital room alone. Lawrence lay connected to monitors, his powerful presence diminished by illness and disgrace. "Come to witness the end?" Lawrence asked weakly. "I came because my children should have the opportunity to say goodbye to their grandfather, despite everything," Riker replied evenly. "Whether they choose to is their decision. Always the practical one." Lawrence struggled to sit up. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about everything." "Yes, you were. Can you ever forgive?" Riker interrupted, his voice calm but unyielding. "No." Lawrence seemed to shrink further into the hospital bed. "I don't understand you. Never have." "You understood me perfectly well when you thought you could control me," Riker observed. "It's only my independence that confuses you." "What happens now?" Lawrence asked, a tremor in his voice. "Now you face the consequences of your actions. The federal investigation continues. Westfield Construction will thrive under new leadership, and you will be remembered not as the founder of a dynasty, but as a cautionary tale." Tears welled in Lawrence's eyes. "You've become hard, son." "No," Riker corrected. "I've become clear-sighted. There's a difference." He stepped back toward the door. "Hudson and Bailey are outside. I'll send them in if they wish to see you. This is the last time we'll speak." In the waiting room, Riker delivered the doctor's prognosis without embellishment. "He's stabilized, but weakened significantly. They're monitoring him closely." "Should we go in?" Hudson asked, looking to his father for guidance. "That's entirely your decision," Riker replied. "I won't influence you either way." As his children deliberated, Riker received a text from Nash. "Final phase complete. These accounts trace to offshore funding. Criminal charge is imminent." While Hudson and Bailey spoke briefly with their grandfather, Riker stepped outside to take a call from Mira. "We've confirmed Vanessa and Donovan purchased one-way tickets to Buenos Aires for tomorrow morning," she reported, using cash and borrowed identification. "Attempting to flee before the indictments," Riker noted. "Predictable. Should I alert federal authorities?" "No," Riker decided after a moment. "Let them board, but ensure our associates in Argentina are prepared to receive them." "Understood." "And the property liquidation?" "Proceed as planned. By the time they realize their Argentine accounts have been frozen, it will be too late for them to return." When Hudson and Bailey emerged from Lawrence's room, their expressions were solemn but resolved. "He asked us to plead for mercy on his behalf," Hudson said as they walked to the car. "Said he'd make everything right if you'd just stop the investigation." "And what did you tell him?" Riker asked. "That it's out of your hands now," Bailey answered. "The federal prosecutors have all the evidence they need." Riker nodded approvingly. "You understand, then, that there's no going back?" Hudson's voice held a new maturity. "Yes, we understand." That evening, as they dined in Riker's hotel suite, the final pieces of his strategy fell into place. News broke that Vanessa and Donovan had been detained at the airport attempting to leave the country. Martha, facing her own legal jeopardy, had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. The family that had conspired to destroy Riker was now scattered, disgraced, and powerless. "What happens tomorrow?" Bailey asked as they watched the news coverage. "Tomorrow," Riker said with quiet certainty, "we begin building again. But this time, on a foundation that can't be compromised." Hudson raised his water glass. "To the architect of justice." Riker accepted the toast with a small nod. In his mind, he was already designing the structures of a new life, one built not on the shifting sands of false family loyalty, but on the bedrock of absolute clarity. 3 months after Thanksgiving, winter had released its grip on Portland, giving way to the first tentative signs of spring. The Horizon Tower had reached its 40th floor, rising against the skyline as a testament to Riker's vindication. In a downtown courtroom, Donovan Westfield stood ashen-faced as the judge delivered his sentence. 8 years in federal prison for fraud, attempted bribery of public officials, and conspiracy. The man who had once been the charismatic face of Westfield Construction now stood diminished in prison attire, unable to meet the gaze of his older brother sitting impassively in the gallery. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Riker, shouting questions about his brother's conviction. "Mr. Westfield, do you have any comment on the sentence?" "Only that justice has been served," Riker replied with characteristic restraint. "Westfield Construction remains committed to rebuilding trust with our clients and the community." "Will you be visiting your brother in prison?" Riker's expression remained neutral. "No. Our relationship concluded the day he chose to endanger public safety for personal gain." In the car, Hudson studied his father's profile. "You didn't mention the other charges, the ones related to what they planned to do to you personally." "Those weren't relevant to the public interest," Riker replied. "The corporate fraud was." "Still," Hudson persisted, 8 years seems like. Considering they were planning to have you committed against your will. Donovan's prison sentence is merely the beginning of his consequences, not the conclusion. Riker checked his watch. "We should head to the airport. Bailey's flight from Los Angeles arrives in an hour." Bailey had returned to UCLA after the holidays, focusing on her studies while maintaining regular contact with her father and brother. Unlike many of her peers who sought escape from family drama, she had embraced her role in what she privately called the Reconstruction Project. At Portland International, she greeted them with the confident poise she'd developed over the past months, less the uncertain teenager and more the young woman who had helped dismantle a conspiracy. "How was the sentencing?" she asked as they walked to the car. "As expected," Riker answered. 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. "And Grandpa's case?" "Continuing to advance. His health has complicated matters, but the prosecutors aren't backing down. Lawrence had survived his heart attack, but remained in weakened condition, under house arrest while awaiting trial for tax evasion and conspiracy. Martha had secured a plea deal in exchange for testimony against her husband, a betrayal that completed the family's implosion." "What about Mom?" Bailey asked, her voice carefully neutral. Riker glanced at his daughter. "Her trial begins next month. The prosecutor has indicated they'll seek the maximum sentence for her role in the commitment scheme. 5 years, Hudson added, plus financial penalties." Bailey nodded, processing this information with the same analytical approach Riker had observed in himself. "And the divorce finalized yesterday," Riker confirmed. Her attempt to secure alimony was dismissed, given the criminal proceedings. As they drove toward downtown Portland, the conversation shifted to the future. Hudson had taken a leave of absence from MIT to work alongside Riker at Westfield Construction, learning the business from the inside. Bailey had declared a major in corporate law, inspired by the legal intricacies she'd witnessed. "I secured an internship with Barrett's firm this summer," she announced. "He says I have a natural talent for identifying vulnerabilities in contracts." Riker allowed himself a small smile, the closest he came to displaying pride. "Barrett is an excellent mentor. You'll learn much from him." At Riker's new residence, a modern penthouse overlooking the river, they settled into what had become their ritual family dinner on Bailey's visits home. Unlike the performative meals of their past, these gatherings were characterized by straightforward communication and strategic planning. "There's something we need to discuss," Riker began as they finished dinner. "I've received an offer for Westfield Construction. A conglomerate based in Chicago is proposing a complete buyout." Hudson looked up sharply. "You're considering selling the company?" "I'm considering all options," Riker clarified. "The offer is substantial, significantly above market value." "But Westfield Construction is our legacy," Hudson protested. "Grandfather built it from nothing." "Grandfather also conspired to steal it from us," Bailey pointed out. "Maybe a fresh start makes sense." Riker studied his children's reactions. "This isn't a decision I'll make unilaterally. The controlling interest now sits in your trust, not mine. You both have equal say in the company's future." Hudson seemed surprised. "You really let us decide something this significant?" "You've earned that right," Riker said simply. "You both demonstrated judgment and loyalty when it mattered most." Later that evening, as Bailey unpacked in her room, Riker received a call from Nash. "Vanessa's attorney made another approach," Nash reported. "She's offering to provide evidence against Lawrence in exchange for your support at her sentencing hearing." "Desperation," Riker observed. "What could she possibly offer that Martha hasn't already provided?" "She claims to have documentation of additional offshore accounts that even Martha doesn't know about. Accounts that could implicate some prominent local politicians." Riker considered this information dispassionately. "Forward the details to the prosecutor. I have no interest in bargaining with her personally." "She specifically requested to meet with you," Nash pressed. "Says there are things you should know that go beyond the legal proceedings." "The time for conversation between us ended at Thanksgiving," Riker replied with finality. "She made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences." After ending the call, Riker found Hudson on the balcony, gazing at the horizon tower illuminated against the night sky. "I've been thinking about what you said," Hudson began without preamble, "about selling the company. And I understand the logic. Westfield Construction will always be tied to grandfather and Uncle Donovan in the public mind. A fresh start makes strategic sense." Hudson turned to face his father. "Is that what you want? After fighting so hard to keep it?" Riker considered the question carefully. "What I fought for wasn't the company itself, but what it represented, the recognition of truth over lies. That battle has been won." "So you're ready to walk away?" "I'm ready to build something new," Riker corrected. "Something that belongs solely to us, without the shadow of betrayal." Hudson nodded slowly. "Bailey and I were talking earlier. If we do sell, we want to start a new firm with you. Westfield and Children, maybe." For the first time in months, Riker felt something like warmth spreading through his chest. Not forgiveness for those who had betrayed him. That would never come. But the recognition that from the ashes of that betrayal, something stronger had emerged. "We'll discuss it as a family," he promised. "All decisions going forward will be made together." As Hudson returned inside, Riker remained on the balcony, surveying the city he helped build. The lights of Portland shimmered below, including those of the county jail where Donovan was temporarily housed before transfer to federal prison. Somewhere across town, Vanessa waited in her sister's spare bedroom, her future reduced to the hope of a reduced sentence. Lawrence and Martha's lakeside mansion sat empty, frozen in legal limbo. Riker felt no satisfaction in their suffering, only a cold certainty that justice had been precisely calibrated. He had designed their downfall with the same meticulous attention he brought to his engineering projects, calculating load-bearing capacities, identifying structural weaknesses, applying pressure at exactly the right points until collapse was inevitable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build. But tonight, standing above the city as his children planned their shared future inside, Riker Westfield allowed himself one moment of perfect clarity. He had not merely survived their betrayal. He had transcended it. The headquarters of Westfield and Associates opened on a bright June morning, occupying the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown tower with views stretching from Mount Hood to the Columbia River. The name, chosen after careful consideration, acknowledged the family's legacy while establishing a clear distinction from Westfield Construction, which had been sold to the Chicago conglomerate for a record sum. Riker stood in his new office, Hudson and Bailey beside him, as Portland's business elite and media gathered for the opening reception. The space reflected his aesthetic perfectly: modern clean lines, natural materials, and absolute functionality without excess. Like the man himself, the design revealed nothing it didn't intend to. "Nervous?" Bailey asked, straightening her father's already impeccable tie. "Focused," Riker corrected, though the faint smile he permitted himself acknowledged her teasing. The past 2 months had brought the final resolution to the Westfield family saga. Lawrence had pleaded guilty to reduced charges, receiving home confinement rather than prison due to his failing health. Martha had relocated to Arizona, cut off from her social circles and former life. Vanessa had received a 4-year sentence, eligible for parole after 18 months. The family that had conspired against Riker now existed only in the periphery of his world. Consequences delivered, justice served. The reception proceeded with the precision Riker demanded of all of his projects. Hudson, now 21 and growing into his role as Chief Operations Officer, presented the firm's inaugural projects to potential clients. Bailey, between semesters at UCLA, demonstrated remarkable poise as she discussed the company's commitment to ethical business practices. "You've trained them well," observed Mayor Talia Winters as she joined Riker at the window. "Hard to believe they're the same kids I met at charity events just a year ago." "They've adapted to changing circumstances," Riker replied diplomatically. The mayor studied him with frank curiosity. "You know, Riker, half the city is terrified of you now. The other half wants to learn your secrets. You systematically dismantled one of Portland's most established families without ever raising your voice or showing a moment's weakness." "I simply responded to provocation," Riker observed, his tone even. "Any engineer understands that every action produces an equal and opposite reaction. Is that what it was? Just physics?" Mayor Winters smiled slightly. "The DA tells me Vanessa has requested another meeting with you. 3rd time this month. And my answer remains the same. She claims to have information about additional conspirators, people who helped your brother and parents." Riker turned to face the mayor directly. "If she has information relevant to ongoing investigations, she should provide it to the proper authorities. I have no interest in private negotiations." As the mayor moved away to greet other guests, Barrett Sloan approached with a distinguished-looking man Riker didn't recognize. "Riker, I'd like you to meet Wesley Durham," Barrett said. "He's chief counsel for Meridian Development. They're looking for an architectural engineer for their Vancouver waterfront project." Meridian was one of the few major Pacific Northwest developers that had never worked with Westfield Construction, having been loyal to a competitor for decades. "Mr. Westfield," Durham extended his hand, "your reputation precedes you." "For better or worse," Riker acknowledged, shaking the offered hand. "For better, in our estimation. Meridian appreciates individuals who maintain their principles regardless of cost." Durham's assessment was direct, professional. "Would you be interested in reviewing our preliminary concepts? The project requires someone with your exactitude." "I'd be happy to schedule a meeting next week," Riker replied. "Hudson should join us as well. He'll be taking lead on new project development." As the reception continued, Riker moved through the crowd with practiced ease, neither seeking nor avoiding attention. He had never been the charismatic face of his family's business. That role had belonged to Donovan. Instead, he had always been its foundation, its structural integrity. Now that strength stood revealed rather than concealed. Later that evening, after the guests had departed, Riker sat with Hudson and Bailey in the conference room, reviewing the day's outcomes. "Meridian is a significant potential client," Hudson noted, scrolling through his tablet. "If we secure their Vancouver project, it could lead to their Seattle redevelopment next year. We've received 14 formal inquiries from attendees today," Bailey added, "plus 3 more from former Westfield Construction clients who want to follow you rather than stay with the new ownership." Riker nodded approvingly. "A successful launch." "There's something else," Hudson said, hesitating slightly. "I received a call from Uncle Donovan's attorney this morning." Riker's expression didn't change. "What did he want?" "To inform us that Uncle Donovan is being transferred to a federal facility in Minnesota next week. He asked if we would consider visiting before he goes." "And your response?" Hudson met his father's gaze directly. "I told him that we've moved forward with our lives, and suggest he do the same." "An appropriate answer," Riker approved. "Bailey, have you heard from your mother's representatives?" She nodded. "Her new attorney sent a letter asking if I would provide a character statement for her parole hearing next year. I haven't responded yet." "You're both adults," Riker said after a moment. Your relationships with your former family members are your own to determine. I won't dictate your choices. But you've made your position clear, Bailey observed. No contact, no forgiveness. My position reflects my experience, Riker corrected. They conspired to destroy me. Not just financially or professionally, but completely. My response is proportional. Hudson leaned forward. What if they genuinely regret what they did? People can change, can't they? Perhaps, Riker acknowledged. But regret that comes only after failure and consequences is not genuine remorse. It's merely disappointment in their own miscalculation. That's cold, Dad, Bailey said quietly. It's accurate, Riker replied without defensiveness. In engineering, we don't rely on hopes or intentions. We calculate load-bearing capacities based on demonstrated strength. People are no different. They've demonstrated their character under pressure. I've adjusted my calculations accordingly. The conversation shifted to upcoming projects and business development strategies. The family matter closed with Riker's characteristic finality. As they worked into the evening, the lights of Portland gradually illuminated below them. A city where the Westfield name now carried new meaning. Later that night, after Hudson and Bailey had departed for their respective apartments, Riker remained in his office reviewing preliminary designs for the Meridian project. A text from Nash interrupted his concentration. Surveillance confirms V received contraband cell phone in prison. Attempted to contact Hudson directly. Message intercepted. Riker's expression hardened imperceptibly. Despite everything, Vanessa was still trying to manipulate their children, to find cracks in the foundation he'd rebuilt. Content, he replied. Emotional appeal. Claims evidence of Lawrence forcing her participation in conspiracy through threats. Requests secret meeting with H. Riker considered this information carefully. 6 months ago, such an attempt might have succeeded. Hudson, in particular, had struggled with the absolute severance of family ties. But now, strengthened by truth and clarity, his son would recognize the manipulation for what it was. No action necessary, Riker texted back. H will report contact if received. He returned to his designs, the brief interruption already compartmentalized and filed away. Outside his window, the partially completed Horizon Tower stood illuminated against the night sky, a structure he'd designed, nearly lost, and ultimately reclaimed. A testament to his principle that proper engineering always prevailed against attempts to compromise structural integrity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new designs, new opportunities to build. Like the towers he created, Riker Westfield stood uncompromised. 1 year to the day after the Thanksgiving that had shattered his family, Riker Westfield stood at the expansive windows of his penthouse, watching the city prepare for another holiday season. Below, Portland streets glimmered with early decorations while a gentle snowfall, rare for November, dusted the landscape with crystalline purity. The past year had transformed him in ways both visible and invisible. Westfield and Associates had rapidly established itself as the premier architectural engineering firm in the Pacific Northwest, with prestigious projects stretching from Vancouver to San Francisco. Hudson had grown into his executive role with remarkable aptitude, while Bailey divided her time between UCLA studies and apprenticing at the firm during breaks. To outside observers, Riker Westfield appeared to have emerged from betrayal, not merely intact, but enhanced, his reputation for brilliance now matched by a reputation for implacable resolve. The doorbell interrupted his contemplation. Though he wasn't expecting visitors, the security system had already identified and cleared the arrival. Barrett Sloan. I apologize for coming unannounced, Barrett said as Riker admitted him, brushing snow from his overcoat. But this couldn't wait for morning. What's happened? Riker asked, leading his friend and attorney to the living room. Barrett placed a file on the coffee table. Lawrence died 2 hours ago. Heart failure. Riker absorbed this information with characteristic composure. His father, technically still under house arrest awaiting sentencing on the remaining charges, had been in declining health for months. Martha already released a statement through her attorney. She's requested privacy during this difficult time. Barrett's tone carried subtle irony. She's also filed to unfreeze certain assets for funeral expenses. Standard procedure, Riker noted. The court will likely approve a reasonable amount. Barrett hesitated. There's more. Lawrence left a sealed letter for you with his attorney. They delivered it to my office an hour ago. He produced an envelope bearing Riker's name and his father's distinctive handwriting. Riker accepted it without comment, setting it aside. Unopened. You don't want to read it now. It can wait, Riker replied. Whatever final words he wished to share won't change anything. Barrett nodded, understanding his client's position. There's one other matter. Vanessa has been granted compassionate release to attend the funeral scheduled for this Saturday. Given the circumstances, I thought you should know. Thank you for the information, Riker said formally. Will that be all? Recognizing the dismissal, Barrett stood. Hudson and Bailey have already been notified about Lawrence. They asked me to tell you they'll come by in the morning. After Barrett's departure, Riker returned to the window, the unopened letter from his father resting on the side table. The snow continued to fall, transforming the urban landscape into something almost unrecognizable, familiar structures cloaked in white stillness. His phone vibrated with a text from Nash. All security protocols increased as discussed. These movements will be monitored throughout compassionate release. The death of Lawrence Westfield was not unexpected, yet Riker found himself reflecting on the man who had shaped so much of his life, for better and worse. The father who had taught him precision and perseverance, who had modeled both professional excellence and devastating betrayal. The sealed letter seemed to grow more insistent in his peripheral vision. Whatever final communication Lawrence had crafted, confession, justification, perhaps even an attempt at reconciliation, Riker felt no urgency to receive it. Death changed nothing about their final reckoning. Morning brought Hudson and Bailey to his door, their expressions somber but composed. Like their father, they had processed the family's dissolution with remarkable adaptability. "Have you read Grandpa's letter?" Bailey asked as they sat in the kitchen, morning light reflecting off the snow outside. "No," Riker replied, pouring coffee. "Are you going to?" Hudson pressed. Riker considered the question. "Eventually, when it serves a purpose." "The funeral is Saturday," Bailey said carefully. "Will you attend?" "No." Riker's response was definitive. "My presence would only create unnecessary drama during what should be a private family matter for those who still consider themselves family." "Mom will be there," Hudson added. "Under guard, but there. Her attorney says she's been asking about us." Riker studied his children. "And how do you feel about seeing her?" Hudson and Bailey exchanged glances, the silent communication they developed over the past year. "We haven't decided," Bailey answered. "Part of me wants to see her, just to, I don't know, have closure, maybe. Another part feels like there's nothing left to say," Hudson finished. Everything that needed saying was said in that courtroom. Riker nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'll support your choice. You're adults capable of making your own assessments." "But you've made your assessment," Bailey observed. "No contact. No closure. No forgiveness." "Correct," Riker confirmed without apology. "Some betrayals exceed the threshold where reconciliation serves any constructive purpose." After breakfast, they reviewed upcoming project milestones. The Meridian Vancouver development was entering final approval stages, while 3 new major clients had signed with Westfield and Associates in the past month. The family business, reconstituted and strengthened, had exceeded even Riker's careful projections. When Hudson and Bailey departed for the office, Riker finally turned his attention to Lawrence's letter. He opened it methodically, neither hurrying nor delaying the inevitable. His father's handwriting, once powerful and commanding, had deteriorated with his health. The message was brief. "Riker, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I don't ask for forgiveness. I know better than anyone that you don't grant it once betrayed. You are your father's son in that regard. What I ask instead is understanding. Everything I did, misguided as it was, came from fear of losing what I'd built. Donovan convinced me you would dismantle Westfield Construction after my retirement, that your vision was too rigid for the company's future. I believed him because it was easier than acknowledging that you had surpassed me years ago. You have won completely. The company bears your vision now, even under new ownership. Your brother serves his sentence in isolation. Martha lives in exile from the life she cherished. Vanessa has lost everything, including her children. And I die knowing my legacy is not what I built, but what I destroyed. I leave you with one final truth. Revenge, even when justified, exacts a cost from the victor as well as the vanquished. I hope, for Hudson and Bailey's sake, that you find a way to move beyond the architect of vengeance you've become. Lawrence. Riker folded the letter precisely and returned it to its envelope. His father's final attempt at manipulation, invoking Hudson and Bailey to suggest that Riker's response to betrayal had somehow damaged him or them. It was predictable, almost disappointing in its lack of originality. He placed the letter in his office safe, alongside other documents from the past year's events. Evidence preserved, not for legal purposes now, but as a record of lessons learned and principles affirmed. Saturday arrived with clear skies, the snow having melted into memory. From his office, Riker monitored reports from security personnel, discreetly observing Lawrence's funeral. Hudson and Bailey had decided to attend briefly, paying respects to the grandfather they had once loved. Despite his betrayal, Riker respected their decision while maintaining his own boundaries. The service proceeded without incident. Martha, supported by distant relatives, maintained appropriate dignity. Donovan, denied compassionate release from federal prison, was absent. Vanessa, under correctional supervision, attempted to approach Hudson and Bailey afterward, but was respectfully rebuffed. By evening, life had returned to its new normal. Riker worked late, finalizing designs for a revolutionary earthquake-resistant structure that would become Westfield and Associates' signature project. When his phone rang near midnight, he answered automatically, expecting Nash with a security update. Instead, he heard Vanessa's voice, somehow having gained access to an unauthorized phone again. Riker. Her voice was thinner than he remembered, prison having stripped away the confidence she once projected. Please don't hang up. He remained silent, neither encouraging nor terminating the call. I know you'll never forgive me, she continued hurriedly. I'm not asking for that. I just want you to know that I understand now. What we tried to do to you, what I participated in, it was unforgivable. Is there a purpose to this call? Riker asked, his voice neutral. I saw Hudson and Bailey today. They look incredible strong. You've raised them well, especially this past year. They'd grown through adversity, Riker acknowledged. A valuable, if difficult, lesson. Like father, like children, Vanessa said softly. They have your resilience, your clarity. Is that all? She hesitated. Lawrence's letter, did you read it? Yes. Then you note his final thoughts, his concern that revenge might have changed you. A predictable attempt at posthumous manipulation, Riker observed. Unsuccessful. But he wasn't entirely wrong, was he? Vanessa pressed. The Riker I married could be cold, methodical, even distant, but never cruel. What you did to us was precisely calibrated to the harm you intended. Nothing more, nothing less. Riker interrupted. We'll never see each other again after this call. Vanessa said, an edge of desperation entering her voice. I just need to know one thing. Was there ever a moment when you considered forgiveness, even a possibility of it? Riker considered the question with his characteristic thoroughness. No. The silence stretched between them. 17 years of marriage reduced to this final midnight reckoning. I understand, Vanessa finally said, her voice steadier now. Goodbye, Riker. After the call ended, Riker returned to his designs. The interruption compartmentalized like all other distractions. Outside his window, Portland had fallen silent under the weight of night, the city's lights creating patterns of illumination against darkness. Structure imposed upon chaos, order upon disorder. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A breakfast meeting with Hudson and Bailey to discuss the firm's 5-year strategic plan, final review of the Meridian Vancouver project, preliminary discussions about expanding Westfield and Associates to international markets. The betrayal that had merely destroyed him had instead become the foundation for something stronger, more resilient, more precisely engineered. Hudson and Bailey had emerged as partners rather than merely heirs. The architectural vision he'd always pursued could now manifest without compromise or constraint. In the silence of midnight, Riker Westfield permitted himself a moment of perfect clarity. He had not merely survived. He had reconstructed, and in that reconstruction, he had built exactly the life he'd always intended, governed by principles that would never again be undermined by misplaced trust or family obligation. The architect of vengeance had become the architect of his own uncompromised future. And in that future, there was no place for forgiveness, only the clean precision of justice served and consequences delivered. 1 year after that Thanksgiving dinner, as his father's phone had exploded with panic when Riker reached the highway, the final design was complete. The foundation was secure. The structure would endure. This is where our story comes to an end. The foundation rebuilt, the legacy restored, not through blind loyalty or forgiveness, but through clarity, resilience, and uncompromising resolve, ensuring that everything Riker Westfield built from this moment forward would stand strong against any storm.